Okay, I would now like to introduce Steve Buss. So Dr. Stephen Buss is a consultant hydrogeologist, and Steve's based in Shrewsbury. Steve's got an awful lot of experience, over 20 years in all aspects of groundwater management and risk assessment. Today, Steve's going to consider what data is available for floods, drought, water resources, water quality, waste management, and biodiversity. And in particular, Steve will highlight some case studies where data sets from different organisations that he's worked with are being combined to provide something useful to societies as well as inspiring others. So over to you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Thanks, Juliana. So today I'm going to talk about monitoring and the data available within Shropshire. I've chosen Shropshire as that's what we're talking about today, but really, you know, what I'm talking about today can be applied equally to England and many of the other home nations. The focus is on water, of course, but again, we could be talking about transport, we could be talking about air, social indices, anything. There's so much data available. First of all, I just want to say thank you to my colleague Anna for helping out with the mapping on these some of the slides. So first of all, you'll recognise Welsh Bridge. Most of you will recognise Welsh Bridge, the River Severn on that photo. As you go past to go to the Armoury, you might have noticed on Victoria Avenue, just by the bridge, this chart recorder which shows the level of the river. Obviously, the chart recorder is from, it's been there for at least 20 years, but it's nice to set the scene. This that's my doorbell, sorry. The chart recorder is generating data. It's being uploaded. The data is being uploaded to the cloud now, but it's nice to set the scene. If you can flip the slide, please, Kat. Oh, there's a label on the top of that, and what we can see is it says this river level data can now be found easier online. That's extremely true. There's, I can think of 5 different websites, and last night I looked on the App Store. There were at least 5 different apps that are bringing this data to us in different formats. So just by generating river level data and freeing it up for everyone to use, there's been a proliferation of information sources that we can use. So I'm going to talk about that today, and just give a flavour of the bits of data that are available, and in particular available straight away for use or live, that we can use to create our own solutions. Okay, Kat. Thank you. Oh, my screen's not synchronized with yours. It's confusing me. So here, here's my map of what I'm going to talk about. I am going to talk about Telford and Wrekin, because if you take Telford and Wrekin out, firstly, Shropshire looks a bit odd. And secondly, the rivers just go in and out. The Severn goes into Telford and Wrekin and then out of Telford and Wrekin again. So it's weird not thinking about it as a block. Shropshire's not unusual in its data richness. That's not why I'm using it as an example. As I said, England produces and releases a lot of data. Wales a bit less so. I'm sure Wales collects the data. It's just that it's not instantly available online, so much as it is in England. So So first of all, after this, I'm going to talk about the variety of data sets that we can use to map aspects of the water environment, to understand the spatial patterns that contribute to the different influences of water in our world, the flooding, the droughts, pollution, and so on. I'm going to talk then about time series data, about things that are collected every day, every 15 minutes, and then released for use. It's absolutely not a comprehensive inventory of the data sets available, but it's just an example of the variety of data and also the variety of organizations releasing data, so that you can Google them if you want and find out everything that they provide. I am focusing on accessible data, by which I mean data that we can just get right now, or that we can get by asking. There's a lot of data that you have to pay for, but there's a lot of data that's there for free, and I'm going to try to steer us towards data that's free. The point of my talk is not to wow you with the range and depth of data that's being made available. The point is to make you think, what could I do with the data? To inspire you to think, oh, I could solve a problem with this data. Or, oh, if I combined this data with this data, I would learn something pretty profound about my environmental setting, my environmental problems. So my aim today is to get you to think about your own applications for the data. Okay, Kat, please move on. So here's a wide selection of spatial data, and as you might expect, the Ordnance Survey produce a lot of spatial data that sort of underpins the whole environmental studies. The mapping data, Zoom stack, there tells us, where things are. It's good for a base map. We've got the terrain data of Shropshire with county-wide elevation data. Now the rivers data file, it looks pretty simple. It's just a lot of rivers, but what's good about the rivers data file is that it's a network, and like Google Maps has a road network built into it, tells it where all the roads join up and how you can get from A to B. You can, with the Open Rivers data set, you can connect up the directions of flow and how to get from A to B in the country. So it's another slightly different type of data that we can talk about. Is the network data. Natural England releases lots of data about the areas it protects. Heritage England, Historic England, of course, do the same. Natural England has data sets which describe the habitat type of the land that it's protecting. So you can look into that and decide whether it's a water dependent ecosystem or not. And that brings us back to understanding where water is important for biodiversity. Hannah's already shown you the aquifer map of Shropshire. There's, that map was derived from the geology map, which the British Geological Survey publishes, down on the bottom left there. Shropshire is the most geologically diverse county in England, did you know that? The Rural Payments Agency issue every year a map of what crops were grown. It's quite a fine scale map. It's not at field scale, but it's nearly there. That's very good for monitoring crop types. Natural England, that's another agricultural land classification map there. And the Environment Agency, of course, their remit is all about water. The Environment Agency releases massive amounts of data, and you'll see a lot more later as we go on. These are the flood zones in Shropshire, and it's just downloadable. Okay, Kat, can we move on, please? Now, the other thing, I think this surface elevation data, really fine scale surface elevation data derived from LIDAR imaging, is brilliant. The Environment Agency, again, publishes this. They originally were collecting it to map out flood zones accurately, but now they are engaging in a scan of the whole of England. So, you can see here, this is a map of Shrewsbury with the theatre and the university centre down in the middle bottom of the map. Frankwell Car Park, surprisingly free of cars, next to the university there, and then some fields off on the cricket ground off on the right. This is brilliant data. If you have a application which looks at slopes or angles, for example, this is excellent. I know a application where you can put in a dot, and the application looks at the LIDAR data and tells you the potential of your roof to collect solar power. So this is great. There were a couple of years ago, when the Environment Agency started mapping the country, there was a government minister saying how brilliant this would be for vineyards. And so you can map your farm and say which direction which direction and angle your fields are facing, and whether they'd be good for vineyards. The other thing in this map is the bathymetry. So we've got the level of the riverbed in there as well, in a slightly different blue colour. And I think that's quite nice, because you can see where the deep channels are in the river. As a matter of interest more than anything to me, you can see where the rivers are, and you can also see where the old Welsh Bridge was, the old ford which the old Welsh Bridge was built over, just south of the theatre. It gets very shallow. Anyway, next slide, please, Kat. So that's a selection of spatial data. If I move on to transient data, I think one of the most obvious watery data sets we could look at is rainfall. You immediately think of the Met Office as collecting rainfall data, and they've got a few climate stations. That's the blue raindrops in Shropshire, but the Environment Agency has so many more. And the last year's data from each of the Environment Agency gauges can just be downloaded off the internet. One thing to say is that, I did this talk over the weekend, and over the weekend, or, in the month running up to the weekend, we've had one of the dullest, hydrologically speaking, the dullest period in a long time. So that very dull graph at the bottom is me downloading recent rainfall from what the gauge in Shropshire. Not a lot of rainfall activity, but the point is, it's there. I can, if I ran some code now, I could get the rainfall from last night for Shrewsbury. So that's great, looking at the last year of rainfall at a point, but CEH, UK CEH, issues a lot of data sets that have been compiled for the whole of Great Britain, and CEH Gear, which I'm showing part of up on the left there is the data in CH Gear is daily rainfall on a kilometre grid for the whole of Great Britain. It's a massive amount of data, but you can get rainfall at a point in Great Britain daily from 1901 to 2017, if you wanted it. I mean, I've plotted there. You probably can't see it very well, but I've plotted the rainfall in Shrewsbury again against long-term averages. And what sticks out, and leading me on to the next slide, you can really see summer 2007 as a massive peak in the middle of the graph there. Okay, Kat, can we move on, please? So talking about 2007, of course, I was hoping to download last week's rainfall radar, but there wasn't any. So I've gone back and I've picked up 2007's rainfall radar to show you we can download the rainfall radar, and we can know what's raining right now if we wanted to. And you know, that's brilliant. The Met Office releases rainfall radar data through its data point offering, and indeed it releases forecasts that you can download and ingest into your application. You don't have to you know, we can look it up on the website, we can look it up on an app, or we can actually get the numerical data behind the forecast and use that in an application. Met Office does sometimes charges for quite a lot, and it's not entirely obvious what's free at most of the time to me. The GFS, the Global Forecasting Service, is an American global weather forecast that isn't as good as the Met Office forecast, but it's, you know, will tell you if it's going to rain a lot or if it's not going to rain at all. But that's available free. That can be downloaded. All the numbers can be available downloaded. They've got a 10-day forecast for all sorts of parameters on GFS, and the GEFS, the Global Ensemble Forecasting Service, that issues the same forecasts but from lots of different model runs, so that we can understand the variation or the uncertainty in the forecast that's being offered. So if we're using the forecast to tell us something, we can use the ensemble forecasts to tell us the range of what we think is going to happen. Climate change data sets are available. I've used UKCP09 data recently, so I can't say what the UKCP18 data offers, but there's all sorts of models and perturbation factors that you can download. We can say, oh, okay, so winter rainfall is going to be 20% higher, summer rainfall is going to be 10% lower, or whatever. And we can apply that to the historic data that we've downloaded and see how our models change things, how our environmental conditions change in different periods going forward. Okay, Kat, moving on. Moving away, well, not quite moving away from weather, but, you know, agriculture is very important to Shropshire. And before I get on to the rivers and the groundwater, agriculture is very much dependent upon the amount of water in the soil zone. Which brings me on to satellite imagery. The Sentinel, the European Union Sentinel satellites produce you know, a whole lot of data, and that data is processed into different channels. This is one example of the degree of saturation of the ground as of the 19th of April. I downloaded it last week. The Sentinel satellite passes over most days. Most days it's cloudy, but this was a clear day. 19th of April 2021 was a clear day. And if I compare that to almost the same day 2 years ago, you can see a big change in the pattern of soil moisture around the county. Now, you know, obviously all the fields have changed because of farmers' rotations, but what you can see in these bright colours, the bright colours of bare soil, or, you know, almost bare soil, not particularly vegetated fields. They've moved around, but what I think you can see is how the bare fields in 2019 were quite yellow on the map, and the bare fields now, actually, they're quite orange and red. There's a lot less water about at the moment than there was at this time 2 years ago. So we're seeing the effects of this very dry spring, and we can see it. So from this, I think we can predict that irrigation is going to start earlier this year. If you look very carefully, you can see the quarry in the middle of the image, also a lot drier. We can go and see that now. Okay, Kat, next slide, please. I mentioned river levels at the beginning of the talk. The Environment Agency measures river levels across the county, where the blue diamonds are. Those data are live and accessible immediately, and as I said, by a wide range of websites and apps. Flow data is available for about half of the gauges, and those are the ones with yellow diamonds inside. Flow data is very important, of course, for water abstraction and flood and looking at water stresses, whereas the level data is much more important for understanding flooding, of course. So the data is available. You can get the last 6 years of data straight away, or from the Environment Agency, or you can go to UKCEH and get the National River Flow Archive, and download all the historical data. Okay, Kat, moving on, please. And thinking about river levels and river flows, we can also look at groundwater resources. Here is a map of all the Environment Agency's observation boreholes that we can download groundwater levels from. So what's interesting here is, although you can see there's not a lot of water in the soil zone at the moment, if you look at that groundwater level at Elladine Grange, which is north of Telford, there's actually quite a lot of water in our groundwater reserves this year. So actually river flows might be dropping, but the groundwater reserves are well topped up, I think. There are a lot more boreholes being monitored by the Environment Agency. They're just not all telemetered, and you can easily get those levels by just asking. Okay, Kat, moving on, please. There's a lot of dots on this map. I hope you can see them. Hannah introduced CSOs as a thing of interest. Here's I've also got the map of CSOs, but here are where they are in Shropshire, concentrated on the urban areas, obviously. The Rivers Trust has a great map online, which has taken this location map and you can zoom in and you can see how many times CSOs have overflowed in the last year, I suppose, last time period, which is, you know, frightening, really, for the health of the rivers. But they're not being monitored. But if we look on the right, there are an awful lot of places that are being monitored by the Environment Agency for water quality in Shropshire, including groundwater, rivers, lakes. There are some sewage monitoring, but those are at the sewage treatment works. And then there's a few trade effluent monitoring points where companies are discharging certain effluents into rivers. There's so much data there. The coverage is awesome. And again, you can just go and download it. You can get the data straight away. Well, not immediately, because it has to go through the lab, but after a certain period of time, we can download that data. Okay, Kat, we move on, please. And the same goes for ecology. There's an awful lot of ecological monitoring going on across the county. The Environment Agency monitor diatoms, that's plankton with the yellow spots, invertebrates in the purple spots, plants with blue spots, and then yet more water quality sites across the whole county. And fish came in a slightly different data set, and I couldn't be bothered to type in the grid references for those, but there are lots of fish sites too. This data, again, isn't live, you know, in the same way as the chemistry data isn't live, because it's going, you know, it's been collected, it's got to go through the lab, then it's got to go be verified. So, but I had to ask for this, but the Environment Agency supplied it. That was great. Thinking about ecology, I was thinking about ecology, and I was looking at ammonia emissions. Ammonia emissions are mapped. That's by DEFRA. So that map on the right is ammonia emissions, and rainfall chemistry is also monitored. I haven't got any points for that, but there are sites around the country. And I just thought it was really interesting to see the sources of ammonia downwind of the meres and mosses, which I've highlighted in the north in green there. Right, Kat, moving on, please. So I've finished the inventory of data sets. As I said, you've probably gone, what about the so-and-so data set? Well, there's so much missing. I acknowledge that, but hopefully I've got flavour there for a flavour. So finally, I just wanted to show some applications of organisations that are using the data to provide some value. So in early 2014, the Environment Agency started putting river levels and groundwater levels online, but they were pretty inaccessible if you couldn't do coding. But Shoothill, which is a brilliant company based in Shrewsbury, they collated they collated all of the data and made a really clear and very usable website that you can scroll around, zoom in and see what your rivers or groundwater levels are doing. That's called Geosmart. I go to that most days because it's just so easy to find locations and see what's going on in rivers and groundwater. Since then, the Environment Agency developed its own site. I mean, it's similar. and you know, you say where you are and where you want to be, and it says what your nearest river is, and tells you what the water level's doing, but it also includes a 36-hour forecast for the river level. Here's a pretty boring screenshot of the Environment Agency's forecast for Welsh Bridge. I did that a couple of days ago when it hadn't rained. It's probably, the forecast at least is probably looking a bit more interesting now. Of course, the forecast brings in all of the bits of data that I've talked about so far. It brings in the rainfall over Wales and what the state of the soil is, so you know whether whether soil's likely to generate runoff or not, and then the model, which is based on historical river data, it can describe how all the runoff accumulates downstream to reach Welsh Bridge. Moving on, please, Kat. Geosmart is another Shrewsbury company. They provide different environmental reports, but also they have, thank you, John, they provide forecasting services for groundwater flooding and sewer infiltration live to water companies and to the Flood Forecasting Centre. The good thing about groundwater is it builds up very slowly, so you can forecast it several weeks ahead. When we were building this application, we found that we could reliably predict groundwater flooding about 2 weeks ahead in some areas. So for this system, Geosmart takes the latest groundwater level from the Environment Agency monitoring, adds on the effects of historical rainfall, sorry, not just yesterday's like it says on the slide, it adds on, you know, 30 days worth or whatever we've decided comes through. So it adds on historical rainfall to provide a forecast for today's groundwater level, and then it looks at forecast rainfall from different sources, GFS from the Met Office, like I've mentioned earlier, and then it forecasts how groundwater levels are going to evolve over the next, I think it goes to a month and a half now, but I think we're reliable at 2 weeks, pretty much. And that gives the medium-term risk of groundwater flooding or sewer infiltration. If we just nudge it on one, Cat, please. This is just zooming in on a forecast for Ampney Crucis, which is a village in the Cotswolds, in April 2019, as an example that I got. You can see that groundwater levels in early April were pretty high, and there's a fair chance that Thames Water were tankering sewage from its local sewage treatment works because of sewer infiltration. And at that point, but then it, you know, you can see that we're receding along that red line, the red actual data. And then, you know, as we move further to the right, we see how the forecasts evolve. Most forecasts evolve well and look like they're dropping, but there are a few worst case scenarios which get groundwater levels up again. Okay, next slide, please, Kat. We are getting there, Juliana. We are. So I've talked about bringing together all the transient data. You can also overlay lots of spatial data to tell you some profound insights about the spatial distribution of certain things. So a few years ago, I was working on a project funded by the Ordnance Survey Geovation program. Geovation program is brilliant. If you have a bright idea inspired from anything we've said today, Geovation will fund it and hold your hand through the web development and such like. But this is the catchment of the River Corve, which Luke is going to tell us about natural flood management in later. But we used this as a test study for the algorithms which brought together geology, soil type, slope, woodland watercourses, agricultural classifications, land uses to tell us where the optimum areas for woodland planting might be within the Corve catchment. So, final slide, please, Kat. I'm not going to sum up the talk because I've just given you a list of stuff, really. But, you know, my aim was to emphasize how much data is out there and how much is available to be used, downloaded and used right away. So, I guess I just want to say I hope I have inspired you to recognize a problem that might be solved with environmental data, or maybe you've discovered a solution to a problem that you don't that you might have, or you might have discovered a solution. You know, can I combine this and provide this to someone? And just to say that the Shrewsbury Water Forum has members recognised nationally and internationally for dealing with this sort of data. So Crest can absolutely match you up with someone who might be able to help with your innovation. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much, Steve. Yes, I think you've probably inspired all of us, actually, when it comes to data. We've got quite a few questions on data. I'm just going to go to the top two. So actually, there's one that's related here. So it's from Vicky and Pascal combined. It's, could you see these data sets being combined to create a real-time digital twin for water in the environment? And if so, are there any ways in which we could fund or make this happen?
Well, I think that's an excellent idea. And I think absolutely the water environment is well monitored in Shropshire and indeed in Wales. It's essential to understand what's going on in Wales because of the influence on the River Severn. But yeah, that is a totally feasible thing. I have absolutely no idea about funding, I'm afraid.
Might have to go and tap on the Research Council's door.
Well, yes.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
It's a good example.
There is one from Nick. Sorry, it wasn't from Nick. It was from Paul about citizen science. But I think we'll raise that one later from Paul Lindop to Guy Pluckwell, because he's going to talk about citizen science. So just one from Nick Rukin. Are there any data sets that you think would be useful but aren't available yet?
That's a good one, Nick. My big concern is always how much things cost, you know, and there's a lot of data available free. So what I would say is I would like a lot of the data to be made available for free. Things like address data isn't available. Soils data is very difficult to get hold of. That's tied up with UK CEH and Cranfield. And some of the Met data could be easier to get hold of, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, thank you ever so much for Steve.